Thank you very much, Mr. Tekpe. Aisha Bedwe.
Mr. Tekpe has actually said what I wanted to say. So I think, just in summary, I think any good tax system, in order to get people to comply, has to be as simple as possible. And unfortunately, the VAT system is now very complicated. As Mr. Tekpe said, we have to file a number of returns. And the feedback from the business community is just that it's difficult to understand, and people are just running away from it and going underground. So the sooner we can simplify it, make it easy for people to understand and comply, the better it will be. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Aisha. Yes, Mr. Daniel Noya.
Okay, thank you. And okay, we are on VAT, so I'll continue on VAT. I think one of the things that has caused the dip is the fact that we reduced the VAT rate, one, in addition to the other discussions. Decreased VAT rate, took out the levies, which I don't think are part of this graph. So automatically there would be some dip. As Honorable Tekpe said, he hasn't finished. We also haven't looked at the figures to see what extent the dip it is. But there will be some slight shift because of that. The other issues, enforcement, are things which basically are right. And as we said, the fiscal electronic device, as I like calling it, I prefer it to EPOS because there's always a confusion between the point of sale device that is used for the other payments. But generally, the idea is accepted. We went ahead with the law in 2018. We're rolling it out, but then there were a few changes in technology that we needed to look at. We looked at that one. Now there's the further changes that we are looking at a more comprehensive invoicing system, not just for VAT. So that's what has sort of stalled it a bit. There's a new system coming in which will incorporate all these things that we are talking about. So it's not been abandoned. It's something which basically, is sometimes we say events overtook it a bit, but it's still on the drawing board. Within the next year, we expect that system will come up. But then the other things like enforcement, and we did a VAT gap study, and the gap was quite large. So we all agree that there's a lot of potential in VAT. Some of the reasons have been acceded already as to why these are there. Now, the issue of the levies, and I think is something we need to address, was actually moved out of the VAT system. It wasn't supposed to be a VAT. I'll say it was more of a sales tax system than a VAT in terms of the way it was treated. The base was kept as the same. And Aisha was talking about simplicity. The idea was, look, if we decide to put something on goods and services, and we do all the other things, we'll be making it even more complex than the complexity that it has. So the things which were looked at, I agree that when it comes to the tax structure, there is a base structure. You fiddle with it as you go along in terms of what you want to do, what you want to achieve. It doesn't always come out in the way you expect it. So what the economists call the consequential, unexpected consequences of policy. And these are all things that are there. So you look at policy, you refine it as you go along, and as you look at the things you want to do. Yes, I always say that in everything we have the orthodox and we have those who like to tinker around. You'll find them in this, and sometimes you tinker around, as I said, you don't get the effect that you want. So basically for VAT, that's why I'll say that, yes, there are issues with VAT, we agree, and we are working on it, And over the past few years, there's been this issue of prosecution in terms of taxes, and not just for VAT, but generally for taxes. And so a prosecution unit was set up, procedures have been outlined, because, GRA and from the old IRS, a lot of the cases have been lost, not because there was no case, but because the authority didn't follow their procedures. And so the issue is to get people to follow the procedures so that when I go to court with a case, I have a case, I follow the procedures, and I can prosecute and make sure that what needs to be done is done, enforcement. And all these help the tax system. Because automatically, one, if I know I won't be found out, I'll be tempted not to do what I should do. Okay. If I'm found out and I won't be punished. So if I'm found out, I'm not punished. What do I don't have anything. There's nothing wrong with it. So in doing these things, is putting these processes in terms of tax administration in place so that these things can be done in a way that the outcome will be more effective than what some of the things we are doing currently.
Great. Let me get to Honorable Tekpe briefly, because we need to get to...
Yes, just a brief.
Yes.
I mean, one of the titles I had was the National Coordinator for the VAT project when it was introduced. And I didn't want to bring in political economy issues, but it's very important. Remember that those of us who can recollect, the VAT was introduced at 15%. In fact, the sales tax was to be increased to 17.5%. But it was thought to be high. It was introduced at 15%. Then Kumi Preku came. And one of the concessions that was made to smoothing the introduction of the tax was to reduce the rate to 10%. That was one of the reasons the VAT reintroduction succeeded. But then we had a revenue shortfall. So we needed to increase it by 2.5%, right? Remember, it was still politically hot. And so it was increased to 2.5%, and the opposition was dead to oppose its use for education. Who would want, to oppose anything that is going for education? So for me, it is an allocation, and that is why the GET fund law had to be collected as though it were VAT, and for a long time, all the credit refunds and everything were given to businesses because it is a VAT rate increase to 12.5%. Then this lost power. Remember, it was 15 to go to 17.5%, which is where VAT rate and sales tax rates are. So Kufuor administration came, also dead the then now opposition, and assigned the increase of the 2.5% to health. Right, the two most important things which as Ghanaians we value very much. So I think the history is there, it's been written about, and we can go back. So it is not a repetition of the sales tax. In fact, what we are doing now resembles the super sales tax and others. So it was, yes. I'm talking about
on the microphone.
Yes, that's the, I'm talking about the, we don't want it to be a matter there. I'm talking about the special levies, the straight levies. It is that which I said resembles the excise, right? But I'm giving just the origin, of why GET fund and why, NHIL, the levy, and why they are collected as though they were, a VAT. Now, the last point is when it was to be increased to 17.5, we face the same situation we're facing today because of single spine and others. And that's why, because the capital budget was insufficient, that's why it was dedicated to the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund so that it could increase the capital budget. But in all this, it is quite clear the legislation, even for those ones which are separate, says that it should be collected as though it were VAT. And that's why we had to even give some dispensation to business for even the street, levy. For example, zero rating, exports, and the rest. Otherwise, you would. So please, I think that I just wanted to.
Great, thank you very much, Seth Tekpe. And so let's move to our next topic for discussion, and I'll be starting off with you, Aisha Baby. It's important for us to, explore creative ways of using tax policy to support businesses, growth, and job creation, while also ensuring that we generate enough revenue for the development of our country, as many of us would prefer. How do we strike that balance?
Thanks a lot. Well, there are a number of ways and ideas. I'll just give a few. I'm sure others will also have some things to contribute. Some years ago, I think we made a proposal to the government of Ghana, as we always do for the budget statement, and it was around something we call the head office tax regime. So, we always like to say, and it's true, that Ghana is a safe country, and we encourage people to come and, settle here and invest here. But there is a way to encourage businesses to use Ghana as a regional head office for the region, especially companies that are servicing multiple countries in Central and West Africa. And I think particularly is relevant to fast-moving consumer goods and manufacturing companies, which are on the rise now post-COVID. And so that kind of regime maybe would have an element of exemptions, as Dr. Adai spoke about, possibly, or even not exemptions, some kind of enabling environment. So, for example, maybe competitive electricity rates, some free services such as Wi-Fi and other things that make it easy for them to base themselves here and service the surrounding countries and region from here. And so what that does is it encourages increased investment, it encourages job creation, it encourages increasing trade between ourselves and other countries. And as you know, Ghana has great connectivity to other countries in the world. And so that free flow of capital is also encouraged. So a head office tax regime encouraging companies to set up here to service the region is also a great way to kind of reinvigorate the country and encourage employment. I think this is also relevant to the health sector as well. So COVID, made a lot of things apparent to us. And one of the things that is apparent is that we do have a fairly good health system in Ghana compared to a number of Central and West African countries. In fact, people do come here for medical tourism currently as we speak. So it also encourages, good quality level healthcare companies and hospitals to be set up here to service the region as well. So those are some of the areas that this kind of tax regime would benefit. There's already a provision in the tax law for fresh graduate incentives, which I don't think many companies are actually making good use of. So I think it's to encourage and do that education for businesses to know that this is actually something that already exists and maybe extend it beyond fresh graduates. There are people who have been graduates for 2, 3, 4 years and are still unemployed. So encouraging businesses to create those jobs while taking advantage of what is already present in the law could be a way to stimulate that job growth and also reduce unemployment. And lastly, another way to reduce unemployment is, for people who don't have jobs and see themselves not having some in the foreseeable future, they become entrepreneurs by default. Not necessarily because they want to, but because that's all that they see there is to do. And they may not necessarily be well equipped to do so. So I like to say that some of them are not actually entrepreneurs, they are survivalists because their businesses don't tend to last or grow because they lack the support, the education, and the skills to make those businesses last. And so I know we have somebody representing young entrepreneurs here, but again, incentives or ideas and just things that could stimulate them to grow their businesses and have them have that support that they need to actually take this forward. Because where businesses are born, they also create jobs. And so it goes and flows in the country. So those are the few things that I'd like to say. I know others would also have something to contribute, and we can take the conversation on from there. Thank you very much.
Well, once you talked about an entrepreneur, I saw Sharif nodding, and it's important we hear from him, the CEO of the Chamber of Young Entrepreneurs. Sharif,
yes,
what's your take on this?
Thank you very much. She has mentioned something that I just want to start with. Mm-hmm. You see, a lot of investors are interested in our innovation as young entrepreneurs in Ghana. But what happened is that there's no any encouragement for an investor to put in money on the idea of a young person. We do not have the muscles to raise the money, but an investor is coming in with the money. Why can't the state design an exemption for an investor so that when you put your investment in a young person, we exempt you from 1 or 2 or 3 taxes? And this is a huge encouragement for an investor to put in their money. One other thing that is very important is that, you see, we have a tax system that treats all of us the same. For example, corporate income tax, 25%. Now you have a young person on SME that is just starting, and maybe they don't have that muscles. Why can't we adopt a tiered system tax where, for example, based on turnover, at maybe tier 1, you are asked to pay a kind of a fixed amount, maybe 1,500. I'm just giving an example as final tax at the end of the term based on your turnover. And maybe the small and medium taxpayers can also be given a certain percentage on incremental basis so that they can have a briefing window to reinvest whatever money they have in their businesses to grow to a point where you can tax them this corporate income tax of 25%. This, I believe, are some of the things that we can use to really, really empower the growth of business. Don't also forget that there was a tax exemption for young entrepreneurs, I think 5 years or so, but it is never operational. You go and then you even want to make inquiries, they are giving you different stories. Now, the question is that it was intended to encourage you to go into entrepreneurship, to create businesses. But here's the case, you go and they say it's not even legal. It was not sanctioned by Parliament. I don't know, since you are from GRA, you can talk to that. And up till now, you push young people to go to the National Entrepreneurship Innovation Plan. They say there's nothing like that. So these are some of the things I believe from where I'm coming from and the constituency I speak for, we can innovate in that direction that will help business growth. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Aisha, you want to make a
just
point?
a quick one. Sharif, thank you for those points. I think what you've said actually points to one of the problems we have in Ghana, and that's a lack of enforcement. Because what you mentioned about the tiered system and the simplified tax system actually is already existing and is provided for in the tax law, but it's not being enforced. And so that is a big problem we have in Ghana. We have many laws, but they're not being enforced, and also the education level. So you find that some people who actually should know about this, who should be implementing these laws, don't know. So I think that's something major we have to grapple with in Ghana, and this goes beyond tax. Different laws exist, are not being applied or enforced. So maybe something we need to look towards as a country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aisha. Let me get to... Yes, Honorable Tekpe. Yes,
one
briefly.
quick advice I would give to the chamber is to get those who do tax for money, like Dr. Ali Nachia, to educate the youth about the tax incentives they can get. For example, few people realize that if those who use just laptops for it, you can get accelerated depreciation for the laptop that you bought, right? You can get, even if you have a kiosk, there's nothing that says that you get depreciation must be as opulent as this building. You can get the depreciation and that would reduce, the tax that your members have to pay. I think this is an education which we do not have a very strong tax practitioner for small businesses, but I believe that since you have a group, if you get 2 or 3 tax practitioners, they'll be able to save you a lot of costs which you can use to pay them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Tekpe. Let me get to Dr. Ali Nachia. Honorable Tekpe started by commending you highly. Those of you who are engaging tax for money. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I think he has already identified the fact that they have this young entrepreneur. It's in the law. I've always told investors that they seem to ask, do I have to get approval from the GRA? Honestly, you don't. The law is bigger than the GRA. The law has given it to you, so take it. File your returns, and you don't pay any tax. Let them come after you and say you owe. Once you are 35 years and below, you qualify. And aside the 5 years, if you make losses, you can carry forward for 3 years. So you make profit after the holiday, you make profit, you can deduct the loss you are making. And depending on the area, if you're in a priority area, maybe tourism, ICT, petroleum, mining, manufacturing, you have 5 years. So the incentives are there. And as Aisha mentioned, you start and take some young graduates, you qualify for the deduction of the young graduate salary in addition to a percentage of it, depending on the number of them in your... But what I think GRA can do to help you on this stratified taxation is if they can roll out the modified taxation in the second schedule to the Act to deal with small, medium-scale enterprises. That they have rolled out, they've done everything. It's just left with the rollout. So that those in that sector, maybe 5% flat rate, it takes care of your VAT, your income, everything, so you can concentrate on your business. As you grow along with them. And then I want to quickly touch on something Mr. Nguyen mentioned, which is very good on the enforcement. The GRA has been in talks with the Judicial Service, so they set up criminal courts for tax offenses. And I think it's a welcome news. All of us who are complying, it becomes this incentive when somebody is walking free, and he is a worse offender. And I think that it's not a one-way sword. If the revenue officers are also being compromised, they also have their day. Then there will be transparency, because we just hear it's perception. Revenue officers are corrupt. Let them bring the evidence, and then we can deal with that. But also quickly, I was going to look at the tax exemptions Mr. Ade mentioned. I think when the government came into power, there was a
that's
policy.
actually our next issue. So
okay. I thought
so let me just get to Mr. Noah, then I'll come to you
No problem.
when it comes to the tax exemption. Yes, Mr. Noah, you wanted to make a point.
Yes, I think I'll talk on what we just talked about. The other panelists have actually mentioned it. And it's actually a culture which I think we need to overcome. The culture of not using consultants or getting information. I was talking to a young man just this morning, and he actually mentioned it. There seems nobody is interested in getting a consultant or getting information from anybody else. We jump into things, and then in the middle of it, we realize that we have problems. And so that advice, I think, is something that the information is actually out there. Go on the GRA website. There's a depth of information. And all over. And it's interesting that we are in a technological age. We have a lot of young people who the only thing they use their systems for is not the research they need to do that will help them. And so there's a lot of tax information out there. Get into it, you'll find it to update. What has even been done is that there was a project we've reduced with the GRA, reduced the tax laws into understandable language. So there's abridged forms of the tax laws on the GRA website, which makes it easier for you to understand. So it's not the normal legalese which Dr. Nachi and his people like. Okay, so let's look at it. And while on it, I want to make a quick intervention on, we've talked about entrepreneurship. I want to mention what actually government is looking at in terms of doing.
Okay.
I'm sure we've all heard of the CARES program. We've mentioned Obatampa. And Obatampa is a 100 billion project. It's looking at a certain aspect of the economy and how we can move Ghana forward post-COVID. There's a revenue component, a financing aspect that 70% will come from outside government. Government will provide the other 30 billion. Now, and that 30 billion is a mix of things that are going to be done. First, there's improving revenue collection, tackling exemptions. Those are the two revenue handles. They're looking at the budget itself, tightening fiscal discipline in terms of spending, the waste that everybody talks about. They're looking at creating additional fiscal space and keeping the budget in a way that we'll have our deficits and everything, but then it's manageable in that sense. Increasing efficiency in public procurement and public investment, which are issues that we all talk about. And so with these ones, and then even with the way we deal with the concessional loans and other things we get, looking at them a bit more carefully and looking at what we'll use those things for. The other one is, then the other thing is, Honorable Tekwe talked about GIF. Now, GIF is being refinanced to a certain level so that this year's budget was there. Some portion of the FBFA, which was originally for them, is being given back to them to enable them do the kind of investments that they were set out to do. So these are a few of the things that government is looking at in that. Now, when it comes to that, let's also know that there's a depth of incentives already in legislation for businesses. If I just pick manufacturing, VAT, there's the exemptions that they get on machinery and accessories that they bring in to get, and then there are several industries. There's the VAT deferment scheme, and it's something that people seldom talk about. But that deferment scheme helps a lot of manufacturers. Because what happens is that when you're importing any exemptions that they get on machinery and accessories that they bring in to get, and then there are several industries. There's the VAT deferment scheme, and it's something that people seldom talk about. But that deferment scheme helps a lot of manufacturers. Because what happens is that when you're importing anything, machinery and the raw materials and things you're bringing in, you don't pay the VAT upfront, and which you should do, and government will collect it and later on give it back to you as input. But government allows you to keep that money, it helps your cash flow, and therefore it allows businesses to plan in. The only thing is that you have to be compliant, you need to be certified, there are certain things, conditions you need in order to get these things. Chapter 98 of the customs tariffs has various incentives and things that allow industry and businesses to, I can go on and on, but all I'm saying that, and I think that's one of the things, the information is out there, but it's not out there. It's out there, so we need to look at it, because yes, sectors we are looking at in terms of the 70 billion growing the economy are quite a lot. And it's important that we share this information as we go along. And it helps us both revenue-wise, because there are some incentives that will be created for them, and there are those things that they also need to get for themselves. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dan-Noya. So let's move to a very controversial issue. And I'm going to start up with you, Dr. Alina Chen. Dr. Adai started by talking about it. Now, annually we're told we lose billions through tax exemptions. As a people, we all do know we need money to ensure that we're able to achieve all the things that we need as a people. There's been lots of talks about the infrastructure gap in this country. How do we improve upon our tax exemption policy? How do we ensure that we do not lose that much through the exemption of taxes? And I'm starting off with you, Dr. Alina Chen.
Thank you very much. I think that Dr. Ade would confirm we've now grown up to almost 2% of our GDP, if I'm not mistaken. We got to a 1.98, you come down again. That's impressive. But the important thing is this, as I mentioned, when this government came, they suspended all exemptions, and then everybody with an exemption was required to pay and apply for refund and justify. I hear not everybody could come for the money. It showed that the exemption was not right. What happened to that program? What happened to the money we saved from that? We should have continued. Like Honorable Setekwe said, when we start a policy, we should let it roll to the end. Then we'll see those who generally did not have an exemption. We have an exemption bill which went to Parliament, was it 2019? 2019, we are in 2021. We've not heard anything. And I even have certain concerns in some of the sections that I would raise with my tax policy advisor here. Yeah, so I think we would look at that. I could see the procedure. The minister, you have to apply to the minister, and nowhere is even GRA playing a role. If it is not to be in the act, it to be a regulation. I remember when Honorable Setekwe, GIZ made me do some work for them. You saw the report. We set out a whole framework, I think I shared with you, whether we can incorporate it in the law. We are saying the president is exempt from goods imported for his personal use. Then we go to a subsection to say anybody who imports in the name of the president commits an offense, and he will pay a penalty of 1,000 penalty unit. If the value of the goods is 20 million, why wouldn't I pay the penalty and misbehave? So if we need to take it out, we take it out. At other stages, people say the president should pay tax. Then we say other privileged persons. But you go, you see the definition of privileged persons. Let's close it. Let's not open it. Who is a privileged person? And who determines who is privileged? This is where the abuse starts. You're one of the privileges. And then you come to special tax incentives for strategic investment. These are where the challenges are. What is a strategic investment? Who determines a strategic investment? We've been having debates on the exemption for Pullman Hotel, for example. I keep saying that same airport area, we have, how many do we have there? We have Ibis, we have Holiday Inn, we have Marriott. Did any of them come with an exemption? What makes it a special? So these are the challenges and if we don't save the money that we are losing by way of exemption, it's lost not only through the misapplication of the incentive, but also leads to corruption. Because if you look at the reports on corruption that the Deputy Commissioner of Shraj mentioned, in 2018, 13.8 billion Ghana cedis, which was $3 billion, was lost to corruption. And that was 20% of our budget. 20%. So in this COVID era, when we want to save businesses, and I'm saying with the budget, now we have almost just 8 months to go. Where are the low-hanging fruits we can look at? Block these loopholes and mobilize that money. Because 3 billion, with all these levies, we are looking at how many, Honorable, is 866 million. and we are losing billions. Why don't we block and save that and not use taxes to disturb businesses? Because we need them to grow. Then we can grow with them. After COVID, we can look at the taxes that we can let them contribute. So I think on the exemptions, that is what I would contribute with. And then once we block the loopholes, I'm sure, as I mentioned always, ASEP report shows we are losing on average $1.5 billion from natural resource sector. And 1.5 billion would be more than the levies we are imposing. So our concern is let's deal with the corruption, block the loopholes, save. Honorable Setekwe mentioned we look at the expenditure management. We should be able to raise the revenue without looking at the taxes for now. We can look at it after COVID. We're looking at COVID will be with us 2-3 years. Let's assume the 2 years is almost gone. Next year we can come to Noe and Ade to look at tax policies. Thank you very much.
Great. Let me get to you, Honorable Setekwe, briefly. Yes.
Yes, thank you very much. Let me talk on the structure and then process. We need to look at it. I think I started by saying that there are certain exemptions which may be inevitable. For example, the personal, exemption that is given, it may not be, make much difference for somebody earning 40,000, and above. But for people who are just around the minimum wage and the base pay, for them it makes a difference. So, and if you look at the number of employees who benefit from that, so it's a deliberate social intervention too. And that's the same we have with education, health. Someone would say, okay, and then the third element is the projects. And the simple logic is you take not even the World Bank. You can't even use the World Bank. You can't use GIZ. You can't use any development partner, multilateral or bilateral, giving you a loan. You can't use a portion of a loan to pay the tax. This is the thing. So what it means is that once you have taken a loan, if the equipment comes, right, you have two options. The government can pay, the tax. And actually there used to be what we call the Treasury Credit Note, whereby if Ministry of Roads is receiving equipment for a project, they would issue a credit note to GRA, right? But it is nominal. The big thing is compliance. It helps you track, otherwise you make a budgetary allocation for Ministry of, Roads, and Ministry of Roads will use it to pay, the tax and GRA report. So what goes out as revenue comes in as, expenditure. It cancels out. It crosses out. So that's one, process that was tried many years back. It couldn't be sustained because of difficulties of implementation. But maybe in these days of IT, it may be possible, to have. I think there was a mention which I support. The issue we have is customs has always been well established in terms of systems. GCNet, ICOMS, the domestic tax division. It was only the VAT service when it was established that had, a solid VIPs, which became the TRIPS.
Okay.
So I think that we need to, so with electronics, it will be possible to probably reintroduce a tracking system, which can be, otherwise we would have this issue of whether, because if you made the contractor pay upfront, right, you run into cash flow problems for contractors, and others, and there are huge amounts, which is the outcome of the deferral system. And in actual fact, under the old sales tax regime, that's why you put them in a ring and defer the taxes paid on inputs. So I must say that in terms of the bill, we should look at what is inevitable and not overpromise, right? And then, we tackle those where there are compliance and other issues, more critically. If we are going to be introducing maybe Treasury Credit Notes and others, these were all part of the discussions that were ongoing, which went into the bill. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Nuya.
Okay, thank you. I'll start from where Honorable Setekwe left off. There has been quite a lot of work done on exemptions over the past 4 years. And I like using the word tax expenditures to tax exemptions, because it goes beyond exemptions. We've been talking about incentives and some of those things. Some of them are expenditures which government should undertake, but then it uses taxes in place of instead somebody does it and then gives the person that leeway instead of doing it themselves. So for tax exemptions, that's import exemptions, which most people are talking about when they are talking tax exemptions. We've moved from around 3.8 billion in 2017 to 1.7 billion in 2020. So basically it's come down. One of the things that we tried to do was, especially the discretionary.
Are we talking about cedis or dollars?
Cedis, I'm talking cedis. One of the things that we talked about was the discretionary exemptions that we call the special permits, which were things we were doing. So basically, that has become negligible. The last time I looked at it, when we go to 2 decimal point places in terms of billions, is 0. Though there's some, what we've done is that if the thing has to go to Parliament, push it to Parliament and get a parliamentary approval. So we've streamlined a lot of it. There's a certain level of automation even in administration in terms of some online. Right now, most of the things are uploaded online. The applications don't come to the ministry in physical paper. There are some that still come because there are some that should. But aside of that, basically you upload where with the ministry, MD, you upload wherever you are. It gets onto the system, is processed in that way. So these are some of the end. That one also helps when you reduce the human contact. So you reduce the sense, the perception of, should I use the word corruption, that comes in. And so everybody knows, okay, along the line, this is what we should do. If it gets, there's an exception report which we were working on. And there's something I was telling folks that, look, there's a law that says that if you give wrong information in the Revenue Administration Act, there's a penalty on you. If you repeat it, the penalty increases by 20%. And we are going to put that one out there, that even though it's online, because people keep creating all manner of problems even online, we'll start penalizing you on that. And then, so you start improving the system. So I'm talking about exemption, but then enforcement comes here. So, and as I said, a number of things were also done. Legislatively, 2 things were done. The Public Financial Management Act requires the Minister of Finance to report on exemptions. Currently, as I said, it's just the import exemptions because it's easier to track because of the automated system they have. We put in systems now. There's a data collection system for DTRD, the vested taxes, to get that one also done. There's another section of the law, the Revenue Administration Act, actually tells the Commissioner General, and I think that's where I should come, that if there's an exemption which is not sanctioned by law, the Commissioner General has the right to refuse to grant the exemption. The first one is that any contract, any agreement, or anything that involves a variation or waiver of taxes, the Minister of Finance should give his no objection first. Aside of that, and so those 2 pieces of legislation sort of have created the room for empowered GRA, because as you said, there are some legislation which doesn't even go to the ministry. It goes to finance, but to Parliament. As I said, it doesn't go through the finance committee, so no one really looks at the exemption provisions, and it slips through. No one discusses it. Sometimes it doesn't even come up on the floor. It slips through. And so there are some of these things that, and some are just resolutions, actually, agreements. They are not even law. If it's law, it's a different issue. But they are agreements and other things. And so GRA has started ignoring those exemptions. So yes, there will be that kind of conflict that you talked about. But once it's not legal, GRA is correct, and the ministry will always stand behind them when it comes to that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Nuya. So I know many of you have joined us via Zoom and have been sending questions in. Would get all the questions addressed. We'd also try and get some of you to join us and share your thoughts with us on all that is happening. But in moving on, let's get to, the process on digitalization and other initiatives that aim to improve tax payments and reduce avoidance. I'd like to start with you, Dr. Adai, on this. I mean, what is the progress being made in that particular area?
Yeah, thank you. a lot of things are being done at GRA to help in this direction. And I want to mention a few for us to continue with the discussion.
Okay.
You know, the system that GRA, in fact, when it comes to taxation, you cannot do without technology. And beginning, looking at the systems, customs didn't have much problems because of GCNet. And then later, we have the ICOMS, which is working perfectly for us. But with the DTROD, that is the Domestic Tax Division, that's where we had a challenge. And now a lot of things are being done. We initially started with TRIPS. But up to a point, we had challenges with TRIPS in terms of, you know, the way data was being captured over there. And then when it comes to officers, you know, working, the delays, you know, and times that the system sometimes goes off and so on and so forth. So now the system is also going to be changed. There is a system in place that, you know, currently that you are putting in place to replace the the TRIPS. Now, if we come to January, how we will want to do for what we want to perform for taxpayers to feel free. Now, GRA is trying to replace all the tellers in our offices, and then people are going to pay taxes through the banks, and then through mobile money, and so on. And very soon, these things will start. Now, we are deploying an integrated tax system. That's what we call the iTax, as I mentioned, for the Domestic Tax Division to replace the TRIPS. And then ICOMS, I think we have heard about it. The second phase is being implemented. We are finished with the first phase, but the phases are about 4. Now we are moving on to the second phase, and this is being deployed, and then more functionalities for further improvement in customer experience, which will reduce the problems that we have at the ports in terms of leakages and so on. Then we'll move on to the other aspect where, when we come to GRA offices itself, how we perform in terms of the support services, our functions in terms of procurement, freight management, and other things. Here too, we are trying to come out with a comprehensive enterprise system which will provide greater efficiencies across the organization. And then we are also trying to ensure that we are able to capture data capturing and then analytical capacities at the GRA is sometimes weak. And here we are getting systems which we are in the middle of developing the data warehouse to enhance data and analytical capacities which will leverage external and internal data to enhance our revenue performance. We want to have a system we are also discussing something with the Senate, DVRA, so that we can link up with them to exchange data. That process is also ongoing. And we are the more important when it comes to our taxpayers. We are trying to do our best for taxpayers to file and pay online. File and pay online. The system is open, but when it comes to taxpayers going into the field, I know a lot of the companies have started using the system, but we need to put in a lot of education to enable the taxpayers to use the system that we have put in place. So if we are able to expand the online filing, I think people's presence in the offices will be reduced, and it will be easy to have access to this data for audit purposes.
Okay.
So we are working on all these things. And the last one I want to add is that very soon, and I'm saying very soon, we are now having about 20 banks where people can make payments. Previously, we were having the EcoBank and the Ghana Commercial Banks, which were actually receiving the payments for GRA. Now we have expanded this to 20 banks, and people can easily go to the banks to make payments. Our functionality is for tax collection. It is not for, revenue collection like the banks. They are, they have the professional capacity to collect, they handle the revenues. So we want people to be using the banks to pay their taxes instead of coming to GRA office, where we have to train tellers and the rest and so on and so forth. So very soon, as I said, very soon, our tax payments in Ghana will be through the banks, through the online payments like mobile money and other forms of payment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much, Dr. Adai, by sharing the progress with us. Mr. Noah, you want to add something briefly?
Yeah, let me expand on the
briefly. Yes.
On the Ghana.gov. The Ghana.gov platform is the payment system that is coming up, and it's a government-wide platform. So it's for tax revenue, it's for local government revenue, MDA revenue payments, and all the basically financial institutions are linked to it. So you walk into it, there's a portal just like you do for other services. Once you go there, you complete the slip, use the portal, or you can sit in the comfort of your home because it's web-based. So right now, you can actually go onto Ghana.gov and use it to make a payment. The pilot has been working for the past 6 months, and so it's being streamlined. So these are all there and the interfaces are there. It makes it easier to interface with other systems that will be used. So that's a general revenue. It's not only for GRA, it's generally for revenue.
All right, thank you very much. One question many people have asked has to do with, some taxes, which they say maybe could be described as nuisance taxes. Earlier Sharif was telling us about some of the challenges they have, but I'd like your thought on this, Dr. Alina Chiang. So if you look at Ghana's business taxation regime, which of the taxes would you classify as nuisance taxes, or those that are necessary?
For now, I would say that I've not been able to identify any nuisance tax as a nuisance. Because when we say a nuisance tax, we are referring to a tax that, one, does not bring in the needed revenue for which we imposed it, and two, it is causing distortions in the market. So you come in and you don't give us the revenue and you are also giving us problems. I think the challenge businesses have is the tax base, one of which Honorable Setekwe discussed and Daniel Nwe was responding, to decouple the National Health Insurance and Get Fund and making them straight levies increases their cost of doing business, because they are not able to get the input tax credit. And now we've added COVID-19 levy. So tentatively, their cost of doing business has increased because they incur it when they buy, but they can't claim the input. So they can only recover it when they adjust their prices. And that is what we are seeing. And we saw, like I was discussing with Daniel Nwe, are you able to sustain the pressure? And here it started with the petroleum sector. They had to recoil and start adjusting downwards on your energy sector, with the pesos. You took off some few pesos. So I think that in these COVID times, the best we can do for businesses is to at least, if even for a year or two, revert the straight levies to a deductible input VAT. That, for me, will give them a breathing space.
Okay. Honorable Setekwe, in a minute, yes.
There's always a discomfort when you use nuisance, which, by the way, has been replaced by killer tax. So
sure.
Now, I think that the point, quick one is when a tax, I think when it borders, that I spoke to it, when it becomes so complicated to comply with, and this is why we need to come back to the, thin structure of the taxes. Having difficulty in increasing excise is no excuse for giving it another name. Frankly speaking, even the communication service tax is a VAT. but without a credit. And we started, and now we've added, some more, because it's a consumption tax, if by all definition and name. Another area in which it's probably, a nuisance is when you say that, and we have had this actually since the Rawlings administration, where during times of difficulty, we impose a temporary taxes, typically temporary import duty and the fiscal or national stabilization, as we have been calling them. And then we promise that at the end of 3 years, it will go away, and then we keep it. It becomes a nuisance, right? And especially when you have another difficulty and therefore you have to add to it. When times are good, then it must go away. And this has been the tradition all the way from ministers of finance, And I think we have to just keep faith with the public when we say that a tax will lapse. ESLA was, as for example, meant to lapse, at the end of 3 to 5 years, right? At the moment, it's been extended. If you take the bond, it has been extended by 10 to 15 years, because by the length of the bond, did Parliament really approve, that length, because it came through the bond. So I think these are, areas. So it's more of, the nuisance of, of doing things which, becomes very difficult for the taxpayer. But I don't think it is basically in the sense in which it was originally used, which is, more of a political economic definition of, of the ESLA and other taxes.
Great, thank you very much. I'll get to you, Mr. Noya, but many of you are watching us via Zoom, and you've been joining us with your questions. So as we get to the question and answer segment, we'll try also and ensure that you're able to ask your questions or give us your contributions via Zoom. So Samuel Mensah says, I am curious where I can get these tax incentives as a healthcare startup. And Paul and team says, can you share ideas on overtaxed sectors and companies, especially the banks, e.g. corporate tax, development levy, etc. And at the end of the year, investors get nothing from the investments. Sebastian Alassani says, I want an explanation of this tax exemption and foreign direct investment. I see many multinationals abuse this, and Ghana is shortchanged in terms of revenue. Besides, they're not penalized. And then Alex Ampabing says, a problem with the low revenue comes from the composition of GRA. How do we reduce the huge political interference in GRA's work? Starting point is guaranteeing the position of the Commissioner General from political appointment. And he goes with another question that says, how do we get the same powers enjoyed by the Auditor General to the Commissioner General of the Ghana Revenue Authority? Where do I start? Let me start with you, Mr. Daniel Noya. Yes, you wanted to make a point, but you can address some of these questions, and then we'll see if we can get onto Zoom and come in-house also and get some of our participants to join us. Yes, Mr. Noya.
Okay, I'll see those of them that I can tackle. I was going to make a point on what we're talking about just now.
The nuisance
taxes, yes. All right. And I think the earlier speakers have mentioned it. What I want us to look at is, I find the conversation interesting in the sense that, for example, CST that we are talking about, okay, I use the word akin to the sales tax and not an excise tax. Excise is punitive. These taxes were not supposed to be punitive. So they gravitate more towards a sales tax system, which we changed for the VAT. And one of the things was to make sure that the taxes that were coming in were sure of the quantum. With the input-output method, the effective rate really depends on what my input is and what my output is. So I can have a national health insurance levy. I've collected 100. Because of my input, I pay another 100. I have 0. What effectively is going to a levy, if I'm not wrong, at least simplicity, let me use a simple distance, is 0. It's not always the case, but that's the general distance. So the rationale there was, look, let's move these things out, treat them such that we know that if it's 100 that's going there, there's 100 that's going there. I mean, there's different, should I say, opinions on this thing, and even amongst ourselves in tax policy, the arguments that we have about these things are There are so many of them.
Okay.
But the interesting, as I said, is that
Briefly, yes.
CST, we have CST, which we reduced from 9% to 5%. Because of the challenges, we realized that everybody was going to be using data. If you make data expensive, you're making businesses expensive. CST, when it was moved to 9%, was bringing a lot of good money. Looking at the latest study on world prices of data, Ghana is the 4th cheapest in Africa.
Okay.
The 26th across the globe. And so there are some interventions that are being done for business.
Thank
now
you.
the questions. The Commissioner General actually has a lot more power than he uses. If you look at the Revenue Act, there's so many things that he can do, which some of them he doesn't even have to go to the courts to do. And so he has powers, and he has the right to exercise those powers by law.
Thank you very much, Mr. Noya. Let me come in here, start with the questions. Yes, tell us your name and the institution you're representing, where you're coming from, then your question.
All right, thank you very much. My name is Simon Maji. I work for the American Chamber of Commerce. My president is here, Aisha Bedwe. I have a question for the officer from GRA and from the Ministry of Finance, and it has to do with the Tax Appeals Board. When are you going to implement this particular piece of legislation to help the ease of doing business in Ghana? Because businesses and the GRA have varying opinions when it comes to some taxes.
Okay.
So would want to know. Thank you.
Very much. Mr. Noya, yes.
Okay.
Please turn on your microphone.
Sorry. Right. We expect that we'll do the appointments for the members of the board by June. Let's explain that because of the elections, they are now doing the appointment. The deputy ministers are not even in place. We expect that they would have been done by now. But so we expect that getting to the 3rd, 4th quarter, they would have started operating. Originally, it was for them to have started operating from 1st January this year, because the law was passed around middle of last year. We thought all these things would have been done earlier. Unfortunately, it didn't happen that way. So basically, 3rd, 4th quarter, thereabouts, they should have started working.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Let's get on to Zoom now, because a lot of you have joined us via Zoom. We are in a technological era now. And so Dr. Idrisu is joining us via Zoom. Yes? Yes, go ahead. Please turn on your microphone, Dr. Idrisu, and then you can ask your question or tell us your contribution.
Hello?
If you can unmute your microphone so we can hear you, we'll be very happy. Okay, I think we should just come in here. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
Can you hear me? Okay. My question is about the inability of the government to educate the people and to establish in clear terms the connection between the tax collected and the development that the people are supposed to receive. We've been paying taxes over the years, and when you look at the development of the country, I think we can still improve. So for me, government should establish that clear connection between the taxes that they have been collecting from us, and then there should be clear accountability to we, the taxpayers, the citizens of Ghana, how much those monies are being used, and then which specific projects have been undertaken by those particular money. When that is happening, it's going to motivate us to continue to pay more of the tax. And then secondly, to improve and to support small-scale businesses in Ghana. Let us grant them some small tax relief so that they will be in a better shape to be able to run their businesses so that they become globally competitive.
Okay.
These are the few remarks I'm having. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Idrisu, for joining us via Zoom. Yes, Honorable Setekbe, you wanted to say something briefly. And let me say that we've been giving a 5 minutes extension on the Joy News channel. It's actually a minute to 5, but we've been giving 5 minutes. And so Let's go.
No, it's a quick one. There was a question on availability of information. I think the GRA website has the sort of information on incentives, which you can go to the law, but I prefer to refer, taxpayers, especially the young ones, who are also versatile, to go to the GRA website. It's listed. And GRA also has, education units in their offices, so you can walk in there. Education is one of the key functions of tax administration, and you can also get information from the tax officials in your local tax office, the GRA office.
Aisha Bedwe, you wanted to make a point briefly? No, you're okay. Okay, so let's get back onto Zoom. One with the ID Proactive Ghana. You could just tell us what your name is and go ahead with your question or contribution. Could you kindly unmute your microphone so we can hear you?
Okay, thank you so much for the opportunity. Hello?
Yes, we're listening. Go ahead.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Professor Dr. Adai made mention of something like you go to a shop to buy a product, they give you a receipt. You ask whether you should take the receipt or you should leave it. Actually, I wanted to find out what are the benefits? What are the benefits of getting that receipt? As the person I go to shop, they've given a receipt. Actually, I don't know what the receipt is probably. And I want to find out what is the benefit of that receipt that I'm taking from the person who is providing me the services. So I want to find out what are the benefits of having that receipt to myself.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Adai, I believe you understand the question.
Yeah, yes, please.
Please go ahead and answer it.
Yeah, let me restrict the benefits to what we are discussing here. The benefit is that if you pick the receipt, it enables GRA to know the tax that you paid on that particular product that you bought, VAT payment. And that will help us to be able to trace and audit the company for the amount. But if it is your private benefit, there are so many of them which I don't want to go into because of tax. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Noya, you want to add something to it? Yes, please go ahead.
Even for the tax benefit, the issue is that you've actually, in Ghana, VAT is inclusive. So if you pay 10 cedis, you've paid VAT. So if really you don't collect the invoice, what it means is that you've given the person money to go and chop free, or your money, actually, because he's not going to pay it to government. He's taking it.
Okay. Thank you. Let's get back to Zoom. Sebastian, thank you very much. Go ahead with your question or contribution. And Sebastian, kindly unmute your microphone so we can hear you.
Hello?
Yes, Sebastian, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I want further explanations on the foreign direct investment as well as the tax that we actually get or the revenue that we get from. Because I see that over the years, most multinationals come, few years, like 2 years, they will camouflage and change their name to a different name, that they have sold the company to a different brand or a different entity. And then they keep on actually searching the government or the country. So I want to actually get a clear explanation on that, whether it is really helping us more, and also even the employment. Most of them come and they don't actually employ our people in most areas that are a bit technical, just like the normal labor thing. But it doesn't actually give us that rich human resource that we need as a country to actually grow. So I want explanations on all.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sebastian. Mr. Noya, would you address that for him? Or maybe you want Dr. Adai to do it? Okay. Yes, Dr. Alinachi.
I think depending on the sector that they come into, if you take the free zones, for example, it's one of the conditions that a percentage of their management force should be locals. So during the audit, the Free Zones Authority makes sure that every quarter you complete the necessary forms to show how many Ghanaians have been trained or have been groomed and have risen up to management status. It's all part of the requirements. And then also, if they even want to change the company, it's good you have such information. The question is, we are all partners in revenue generation. What information went to the GRA so they could undertake an investigation? Because if you pass on a company, I know under Section 62, change of ownership has all the capital gains tax implication we can take from them. And the new company taking over, there are some deductions they cannot take over. They can't carry forward losses, they can't carry forward capital allowance, bad debt. So there are rules in the law to deal with such issues once the information gets to the GRA.
All right, Mr. Noya, in 30 seconds.
Okay. Quickly, the tax laws also provide that if you're enjoying an incentive and someone takes over, the person cannot, even if an associate of yours is involved in the next, so you sell and then decide that you start something else, it's taken to be continuation. So you don't get the incentives again.
Thank you very, very much.